intersection. I meant to actually count how many weeks we've been doing this at the intersection. It started in April of 2020, so I didn't count, but we know that it's at least 104 plus, right? Because it's more than 2 years. So that's a long time to be meeting on a regular basis, although a lot of us can relate to it, because when people congregate in worship and prayer, right, they tend to do that on a weekly basis. So I'm not directly relating it to it, but people do on a regular basis. In commitment to community, they congregate and they come together and trying to find our hearts beating together on the same page. How can we help each other? How can we move forward? So today we're going to be looking at the intersection itself and the types of work that have come out of it or have been nurtured through it. And we'll be sharing with each other. So, you know, we're the briefers this morning. We'll all be bringing the briefings together. But before we go into that, to give some of our folks a few more minutes to come in, we're going to have a few announcements. One I want to mention, and maybe I can even bring it up. And so we will open the screen for others to know that you can start thinking about this. But today is August the 11th. And so in 1 month, it will be, of course, September the 11th. And not so much to focus on that, but there is an event that's happening on September 11th that I want all of you to know about and share in your communities and bring your communities to as well. September 11th was chosen by our speakers, almost though in a way to say we're still here and we're still resilient and the story continues, and to reclaim that original 9/11 of help. Let's, you know, we need help. Let's work together. A lot of the work that we've been doing is about healing within, you know, across these years. So on this day from 2 to 4:30, and as you can see here at Alta School of Theology, the Whitley Center, one of the collaboratives that we have among us, the Story Collaborative, has been looking at how story helps us to heal, how important it is that we share stories, stories of celebration, as well as stories of hurt. We've all are experiencing, in one sense, a collective trauma in pandemic and in other ways, and how important it is that we come forward and share those stories. So that's why this event has been put together. We've got 4 San Antonio authors, persons that I would think each of you would probably know at least one of these folks, if not all of them. But they're going to be coming forward and sharing how story heals, maybe has healed for them. They will probably do a short reading from each of their books, which were all published this year. Then we're going to share together how our stories relate to each of those stories. So actually the day is a model that can be replicated in any congregation, community center, school, your home, in your neighborhood, coming together and sharing story and how that can heal our community. So it's no cost to anyone. It's free and open to the public. And so I invite you to mark your calendar for 1 month from today, but it will be on a Sunday. September 11 is on a Sunday, 2 to 4:30 p.m. Another announcement. Is anybody with us? I think there is. Anybody with us from Pathways to Hope and can give us maybe an update even on those registrations? Donna, Doug?
Yes,
Anybody?
I'm here. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Yes, the Pathways to Hope Conference, August 26th and 27th. The theme is healing communities, because it is about healing communities. And so it's going to be in person in San Antonio, but the nationally NAMI will be live webcasting the plenaries. Dr. Tom Insel is going to be one of our speakers. And the theme is really about connecting everyone to that healing and kind of keeping with what you were talking about, that storytelling. And this is also part of us coming together to share what has been the collective experience over the last 2.5 years, and how we can move forward with the healing. So I'm gonna put it in chat, how people can go and register for the conference, and it's free. If you do come and join us, and if you like to get lunch, all you have to do is just pay for the lunch, but outside of that, everything is free. And you can also earn CEUs at the conference.
Donna, what's the overall theme of the conference? Can you share a little bit about that?
Yes, healing communities. And all of the workshops in some way will be touching on healing within particular communities. We do have workshops over like domestic violence, faith communities coming around the topic of healing communities and what they've noticed over the last 2.5 years with the collective, dealing with collective trauma. And so that is the thread throughout the workshops, tying in how we can come to a place of healing despite or in spite of encountering all of collective traumas, because it's more than just about COVID. We're still actively trying to heal from other collective traumas that we're going through as well.
How many folks are registered?
We're at almost 700 folks registered. So that's amazing. So please get the word out and share. I'm gonna put the link in. I thought I had the link in there, but I'll put it into the chat there.
I'm gonna go ahead. Our mayor, who also initially convened at the intersection, has a video at the beginning.
Overfunctioning.
See if I can go to the beginning of it.
Overreaching. Polarization.
I pushed all the right buttons to make sure there was sound, by the way. Didn't work, I guess.
Attacks. Collective blaming. To name only a few.
And maybe we'll come back to that. Any other quick announcements, and then we'll start to get in. We're all going to be doing this briefing together this morning. So Martha Ann is I can see. Yeah, there she goes. She has a hand. Yes, Martha Ann.
We invite people to partner with us in interfaith care of creation. I am delighted that Norma with us this morning of the Baha'i community has got this off to a good start. We want young people to realize that we're going to be the most diverse democracy in the history of the world. There have never been so many religions in one country, and we want to work together to care for creation in the face of climate change. So in the chat box, I'll put invitations, and the Baha'is on Sunday afternoon, September 25th at 2 o'clock. We're going to have Baha'is and care of creation.
Be great. I'm going to try this one more time. I clicked all the right, there should be sound, and then I'm not going to do it again. So we'll try it.
As mayor of San Antonio, I've come to realize that our city has at least 3 national best practices.
Yes.
I can't hear
Resilience
it, but you
through
can.
relationships, action through community collaborations, compassion in all things from policy to people. I now understand we have another best practice, our annual Pathways to Hope Mental Wellness Conference. We're in our 7th year, and now NAMI National is extending pathways to 18 other cities across the United States. This couldn't have come at a better time. Friends, we're all sitting in collective trauma together. from the pandemic to mass shootings and so many things in between. Do you recognize any of these symptoms of collective trauma? Numbness, stress, isolation, indifference to social activities, lack of engagement with community, overfunctioning, overreaching, polarization, attacks, collective blaming, to name only a few. It's going to take courage, but we've got to step up and take action, both as individuals and as communities. We need to each act responsibly and take up our roles in the healing process. We need to recognize how our self-care and mental wellness impacts the healing of the community. Compassion is never a solo or individual effort. What I do impacts all of us. What we do impacts each of us. Just as there are specific ways to heal, care, and strengthen ourselves, there are also specific ways to do so as a group of people, as community. Creating safe places and spaces like Pathways to Hope where we can be vulnerable with each other. Storytelling and listening to others' experiences, our differences and our similarities. Being present to and really seeing others, that we're not alone in our pain or in our healing. And this is one of my favorites, recognizing that hate is not the opposite of love. Love can include hate, but is much more interested in growth, wisdom, and always compassion. Pathways to Hope, this coming August 26th and 27th, will be about community healing and collaboration. It's one of our best opportunities to experience these things that make for healing, for San Antonians and beyond. Thank you.
So good. That's a good example too, the partnerships and mutual work that have come together at the intersection. This time together is called At the Intersection because it was called into being right after the pandemic began. At the intersection of faith, community, civic leadership. The mayor was like, we have to work together. We don't know what's going on with the pandemic. It was right at the beginning. We need to lead together. And how do we do that at this intersection? In a dominant culture of separation of church and state, we must be able to work together in terms of some of the most basic needs of our community and become stronger with that. And so that's what the intersection is about, learning about what is going on across those different sectors in our world, but also working together and moving together and bringing strength to that. We're very fortunate in the mayor that we've had during this time frame that he's been such a lead in terms of compassion and working together. And so I think you can see that by this morning's example and hearing from him as well. So what I want to do is open up the conversation. And I gave an example yesterday, and I invited everybody on the email to be thinking of something specific in these last several years that have come together in the community, whether it had its impetus at the intersection or was nurtured through the intersection. Just what has our mutual work been? And some of us are going to go, oh yeah, I know that one. I know that one. And then we're going to go, I didn't know that. Hopefully there will be things that we're going to hear like that. What I want to utilize though is the reactions at the bottom of your screen. You click on that. Many of you already know that with the little smiley face. And when that pops up, you can just simply click on raise hand. And that's the order I'll take people in. And that'll help keep us moving. We'll want to keep each one of the things kind of tight and brief so we can hear as many of these as possible. So while you're preparing, you might want to name at the beginning what it is, like we collected, donated face masks at the beginning of COVID. So I just named that one. And so maybe a line or two of how that happened. So that's what we did, $250,000 at the beginning. So that was just one of the things that came out of the intersection at the very beginning. So I'm inviting hands to go up. What you know from how you've participated, things that have come out of it. Corey. Thanks for raising your hand.
You're welcome. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for the invitation. My name's Corey Schultz. I am the secretary for the Alta Vista Neighborhood Association. I received this invitation through one of our directors at large, whose name I'm sure you know, Ann Horst, who is very, very involved in our community and very, very involved in the larger San Antonio community. The issue I would like to discuss quite briefly is our Block Captain program. We're a community, if you're not familiar with Alta Vista, we are basically between the San Pedro on the east, railroad tracks on the west, Hildebrandt on the north, and San Pedro Springs Park, Ashby Boulevard on the south. We have a Block Captains program. One of the major things we do is we deliver the neighborhood newsletter 5 times a year, print run of about 1,200. However, one of the things that Ann Horst brought from the intersection onto our radar, so to speak, was the breadth and depth of what a Block Captain program can do. In fact, Ann Helmke was kind enough to share with us this beautiful resource on various ideas of what, in addition to kind of having an informal finger on the pulse of one's block in terms of shut-ins, residents who may have issues, there are more programs that we can do. So based on the information that Alta Vista received from you guys at the intersection, we put out a survey to the Block Captains with information from the online resource asking, what interests you? What do we have the bandwidth to do? Can we get together a list of residents who may have issues that require extra care? Can we start some block yard sales or donations? And all this came just through Ann Horst being on the intersection and getting information from the community. In a past life, I was a public relations professional, and that is really the power of the spoken word and the power of people, all of us just coming together in networks, talking about who we are and sharing what we know. So I really very much appreciate this opportunity to share. Thank you.
And it was a great example. This one just happened last week, and there are now conversations about cohorts in the area in terms of bridges to care. So it's a great example of how connections can happen. Another one that happened last week was on immigration. And following that session and the opening of MRC, there were some other folks working on immigration and refugee work that were no longer able to do the same work because the Migrant Resource Center opened up, but they wanted to continue to help. So that connection was made last week of, when things move and shift, there's still people out there who want to help and commit. And so how do we continue to do that? So that came together rather quickly, and I know they're all back to work. I'm going to start calling on people. So just so you know, oh, here we go. Bill raised his hand. Go, Bill.
So, well, thank you. So I'll just talk about, sacred.org, which I know all of you are surprised to hear me talk about that. But the, from the intersection, we've been doing this, I don't know how long it's been going on, but it's been a while. And so, we have been able to expand, the knowledge and the awareness of sacred.org through a large number of organizations. And so I was just trying to jot down the number of invitations that I've received, and it's at least 10. I was only able to come up with 5 names off the top of my head, but I'd have to go back to my calendar. But I know that we were invited to participate in a program for Voices for Children, which was a training seminar for childcare workers. We made a connection with Porter Loring when we did the gap analysis for bereavement groups. That gap analysis, that connection with Porter Loring, led to 5 new bereavement groups in congregations being started. As a result of what we presented and the work that we did here at the intersection. We developed a relationship with the Children's Bereavement Group, with Children's Bereavement Center rather, that led to us opening up the Uvalde resources page that we have at sacred.org/Uvalde that we're working on in partnership with the organizations in Uvalde that are dealing with with the fallout from that horrible event. We were invited to an event with the Texas Refugee Association, a new organization that's helping refugees. And then we've developed we had a relationship with NAMI and Bridges to Care, but we developed a great relationship with the people at the Warm Line at NAMI. So that's just a few of the things that have happened, and all of those stemmed from from us being at the intersection and participating in this kind of thing.
Thanks, Bill. I was also thinking, by listening to all the examples we've had so far, that the intersection helps to connect community across the community, but within the community. I think Corey's example gave us that, right? It helps to resource our community. So Bill's example and the work of the San Antonio Community Resource Directory and connecting people with resources. I'm thinking that maybe this is the resource that Corey saw online when Ann Horst was showing her something online. It was probably Sacred. And also what I've heard in all of them so far is that it develops relationships and how important that is in our mutual work. I mean, we can even look at how we have this mutual relationship with the mayor. There's an example, a relationship that I know in terms of community organizing. There are a lot of community organizers that wish there was that strong of relationship, but we have that as a whole community, and we can work together in that. Someone else want to raise their hand? Okay, I'm just going to read across my screen. So Karen Ball, you want to say something about the domestic violence prevention in the faith community collaborative?
Sure, thank you, Anne. So one of the things that the intersection did over the course of our meetings is invite our city council reps to come and share what was happening in their council districts and kind of their vision. And when my councilperson Manny Pelez came, he kind of took the faith community to task, pointing out that when domestic violence atrocities show up in the news, one voice that seems to be silent is the faith communities. And so from that, there were a number of us in this intersection that stepped forward and said, we want to do something about that. And we have started meeting, and we now are trying to focus our attention in on individuals that use violence as a way to respond to conflict and kind of socialize them into a more peaceful and compassionate way to resolve their conflicts. And the reason that we're focusing here is that many of the things that the city is already doing with collaboratives on domestic violence is focusing on the victim and those that have bore the brunt of violence. And so we felt that this was one area that we might be able to shore up some response to.
Thanks, Karen. We're going to be hearing too from that collaborative, and that's why we're also spending our summer looking at each of the collaboratives that are at work. But that was an important one. We had a city council person come challenge us, and we've been stepping up and trying to make that work. Tom Hager has his hand up. Tom, make sure you unmute yourself. So collaborative efforts is one of the other things here.
It sure is. First, word of thanks to Bill for the work that Sacred does. I work with two tiny little churches who don't have the ability to create their own community resource directories. You've done it for them, and I'm grateful, and they're better because of it. Now, the logotherapy approach to healing, this is a personal corollary to all of the major healing events. It's a book that a buddy of mine gave me, those of us who need to do logotherapy, so we can go back and read it over again and maybe get it a second or third or fourth time. 4 pivots. And this young Black PhD professor, community organizer, whose name I'm not sure how to pronounce, and because I'm sort of pre-eye drops, I think I'm going to just cover myself with it. He does a really good job of saying, hey, you community activists, you do anti-racism work out there. What are the residual pieces of racism living within your own personal dynamic that also need healing, and in fact may need healing before you can be an effective healer in the larger community? That speaks clearly. I've worked anti-racism stuff for a long, long time and tend to ignore the subtle, this is the way it's always been, and it's frankly okay, racism growing up in the Chicago suburbs 70 years ago. And so message me, direct, whatever. If I can follow up with information about this book, I will pester. It's rapidly making it to my required reading list. Thanks for listening. That was longer than I'd hoped, but it's also better than you expected. And so thanks, community. Appreciate. Take care.
Thanks, Tom. It makes me realize too, as all of you recall a couple summers ago, there were folks at the intersection, and we had several briefings around this topic, police reform. Out of the intersection in those conversations, a group within the intersection started to do work with the police department on police reform. That came out of the intersection. Book reads came out of the intersection at that point as well. Community conversations came out of the intersection. There was one in the fall that was called Living in My Skin. A local artist, Lionel Sosa, who also happens to be a San Antonio Peace Laureate, did portraits of 30 Black men here in San Antonio and their stories and the telling of stories. So community conversations have come out of the briefings and each of our concerns for current context. So thank you, Tom, for that reminder. I remembered the book reads and the community conversations as well. I see Jane on here. I don't know if Jane would be willing to speak at all, but she's connected to some really powerful work and is also part of the housing via the Faith Community Collaborative. So Jane, like, why do you show up to the intersection, and what things have you seen come and grow out of this? Do you mind?
Yeah, I could say a few things. It looks like I'm having a lighting issue. It seems to be flashing here, so I'm not sure what's going on.
You look fine.
Oh, well, that's good, but it's weird. I feel like I'm in a discotheque here, but hey, what can you do? So I am just amazed by all the gems of advocacy and support we have in San Antonio. My focus is older adults and people with disabilities in housing, transportation, caregiver support. I lead the initiative Reframing Aging. All these things are so important to me. And you know what? I know one thing. Aging isn't an issue. Ageism is. And it's everywhere, and it's so embedded in our communities. And I keep coming back here, Anne, because I feel that as a person who sometimes feels at the front of things, pushing and shoving and helping people change lens, I need respite. I come here and I see other people who are in the arena, and I feel energized. I feel energized because this work is it's hard work. And shout out to Paul over there, my other Reframing Aging buddy. But collective impact is what I do for a living, and it's a slow grind. So every time I come here and I see so many wonderful people in so many different areas, helping me to look at this issue or challenges or opportunities a different way, from a different view, even if it's just slight, I am empowered. So I keep coming back every Thursday. We have housing challenges here in San Antonio. We don't have accessible, available, affordable housing, and it just keeps me up at night. So you guys don't know this, but I am a wheelchair, and I'm going to use the new terminology that I heard the other day that I just love. Instead of me saying I'm a wheelchair user, I am a wheelchair rider, and I have been for many years. So I am a narrative change practitioner. I really think about my words and know how much power they have. And my last thing I just want to say is aging so cool. Everyone's doing it.
So I think this is also another prime example of what happens at the intersection is learning from each other, right? We might have briefings, but Jane is just so good at this. I learned the 3 A's about housing that I actually hadn't heard all put together from a lot of leaders. But I mean, Jane is just adamant about that accessibility, affordability, and availability, right? And that we need all of those when it comes to housing. But we also learn language from each other that is more compassionate with more respect. So thank you, Jane, for your efforts in that sector of all of us who are growing older. All of us are growing older. And for her work at the Housing Be the Faith Community Collaborative that's formed. Peter has his hand up. Go, Peter.
Thank you, Anne. And I agree with Jane as well. It's very edifying and inspiring hearing many of the stories and appreciate your perspective as well and putting things in context. But my first experience, I was invited in October last year for my first experience with the intersection, and there was a Faith in Blue briefing about law enforcement, and it was a conference that was going to be on that Monday, and I attended. And from that conference, we have a school and a daycare, and so they offered a free assessment, a Homeland Security assessment, and with the opportunity to be able to seek funding to harden our school and our daycare. But what I really got from the conference was how that conference was so much bigger, was a fusion center, how the law enforcement community wanted to connect with the faith community so that we could be partners in how we can provide safety in our community. So that's kind of really bled into more work for our ministry and how we can kind of be that more of a resource in community. We have applied for that hardening of our school grant in September. We're believing God that's going to come through. But even if it doesn't, the fact that we've started those movements to harden our school and become more connected with law enforcement and becoming a better resource has been a great movement for us, and feeling more safe and knowing that we're trying to do the right things to help in our part of the city and how we can connect. And then of course, Bridges to Care, we just got on board with that. We're attending the classes right now. We've got a small group from our church that is going through the core modules so that we can develop our own mental health wellness team or program in the ministry. So those are just a couple of things that are personally impacting us as a ministry, which we hope to do more in the collaboration with other ministries.
And that's just what a great example, Peter, because you've given several of how your congregation have been able to engage, probably in ways before you attended that event with the Fusion Center, you probably weren't doing. And now almost a year later, you've gone different directions with Bridges to Care, a relationship with SAPD, doing an assessment of your facilities. So there have been hands-on things that you've been able to engage that you didn't know was out there, applying for a grant. Those are all good things. It's 8:34, so I'm going to just take a moment pause for any folks who need to leave. And I want to thank you for being here today. I'm not sure what we're covering next week. I kind of had a good idea, but I'm kind of rethinking it. But we will be looking at another collaborative next week, and I'll be sending that out to everyone. I'm also going to send out, and maybe Bill will go ahead and post the link now, but I'm going to send out the link where these recordings are, housed. And we've had people like the one last week in terms of some volunteers wanting to continue to help. They weren't able to attend at the intersection that day, and I sent them the link, and they've shown it to the entire congregation, which was a great update on what was happening in terms of immigration locally. So we can utilize, it's another example, utilization of now these recordings that it's just not us, that we can share it with others and help things move along for the work that we're trying to do within our congregational organization, but also what we're trying to do together. So thank you for being with us. We're going to continue until about 8:45. No need to worry. Yes, I'm missing a meeting for all of the staff with the city manager right now, but I'd rather be with you. So just, I'm trying not to like get started at 8:15, so I'll be fine. I doubt if it's recorded, but I have colleagues who will tell me what I missed. So back to the conversation. Any hands up? Anybody want to add to why you keep coming? And we've dropped down to 18. Look at that. But I think it's important that every once in a while we do come back together and find out what is happening. Where is the heartbeat, extended? Rich has his hand up. Rich is one of the co-facilitators for the Housing Via Faith Community Collaborative.
Hi, thank you, Ann. Good morning, everyone. I just want to say I keep coming to these because I feel that congregations are the utmost importance when it comes to getting out to the community. They're a central figure inside so many people's lives, and housing is a necessary part for everyone. And I just feel that there's lots of possibilities with us, and we're starting to see some good things come out of these collaboratives, meetings and everything. We're talking to congregations about land possibilities to do with their properties and build more affordable housing across the city. And I really appreciate the opportunity to be able to speak to congregations about these spots. And I want to put in the chat right now, congregations, please do this survey. If you have time to do so, please, we really need all the congregations. This is a survey out of our Housing Faith Community Collaborative. What we're trying to establish here is housing events for the future. We're looking at bringing in housing resources. We had a very successful housing resources fair at Antioch, and we want to do more of those where we bring in our housing resources from NAMI and My City is My Home and all these different collaborative organizations that we have together to provide housing resources. We want to bring that to your congregation, and we can help you all set that all up and everything. And so doing that survey lets us know what are the resources, not only that we could bring to you, but what does your congregation already provide, so we can see what the different resources each congregation does. And also, we're looking at helping congregations create their own resource navigation program. So there's a lot of congregations out there that have their own person that's helping out, different people in your community provide resources. And working with Sacred, we came up with a plan to help establish an easy plug and play kind of resource navigation program for your congregation. So this and more, I could go on and on, but this is not the housing collaborations. I invite you to our next one, which is on where is it, Ann? I had it up on my screen and now I moved it. The next one is
the next collaborative.
Yeah,
should be next Tuesday.
Next Tuesday. Yes, August 16th, August 16th, 3 p.m. So I hope you guys are interested in that, but I put the link for the survey. Please share that with congregations. We need as many. We only have 2 congregations that have done the survey, and we need more so we can understand what's going on and what resources are provided and that are needed. Thank you.
It all did make me think of something. Last week, as you recall, if you were with us, we had Mel Woosley here, the executive director with the Department of Human Services, and she gave us an in-depth briefing of immigration, what's happening right now. Later, there was a conversation among those who do a lot of direct services in terms of people migrating through here, but more importantly, that are staying. And she had mentioned a percent, I wish I could remember that now. I think it was like 1%. She had given us the larger number, there'd probably been 200,000 who had come through. I might not have this right, but 1% was 2,000 people, right? Now, when we heard 1%, that sounds like, well, that's not very many, right? But it was 2,000 people, which is no small sneeze, right? 2,000 people. And in a conversation with her, she said, you know, the difficulty that we're finding, we've got millions that we're trying to spend on housing, building, refitting, providing. She said, but we had two really great efforts that were working out there, and the community around where those efforts were didn't want it. We've got to figure out, she says, we've got to figure out how we are going to work as a community to get over those kind of hurdles, because we need housing. We have opportunities, but when we work hard at one, they don't always work, and they're finding out that a lot of them don't work because we're still not working together as a community. And so I've been thinking about that for the last week of how can the faith community and the community at large, how can we help with that? You know, how frustrating it must be for people who are trying to create the housing, trying to spend the money, and then it gets shut down. How can we change that dynamic? You know, how can community treat community the way community wishes to be treated, right? How do we apply the golden rule on a community level? We need housing, and people are working hard, but how do we get the community to be working, to work together on it? I think that's a really important question, which I think is another part about the intersection, is coming up with the right question. You know, it's not just a question of when housing, or that we need, how are we going to get the housing? How are we going to go about it, right?
If I may, Ann,
Yeah.
I'm working on I presented this before, I'm working on a property tax proposal policy that's out. And one of the things that when we're discussing this property tax policy is that we point out what are the issues with property taxes? Like, why is our taxes going up so high and everything? And yes, Texas legislation has a part of it. City council has a part of it. You know, there's all these different players, but I make sure that there's a point to also add that homeowners are a part of it. And the reason of the issues of property tax raising, the reason is not in my backyard individuals that, you know, when we have an affordable housing project that is being introduced into a community, and it's going to build 100 new units or what have you, and then the community comes out that we don't want a bunch of low-income people living next to us. And of course, we've gone out in the community in several different times of saying, whatchamacallit, well, when you say no to affordable housing, you're saying no to low-income seniors and veterans, and we try the empathy route. So, and that hasn't been very successful, honestly, trying to tell people about you know, the different low-income families and everything that they're saying no to moving into their area. So I'm trying to use the property tax as another method, because our housing production, so I'll be really quick. So population growth in San Antonio has increased 30% in the last 10 years, but our production of properties has only gone up 4% in the last 10 years. So every time a community says no to housing developments to be built in their community, they are contributing to the lack of production which increases their property taxes because there's not enough housing out there. Just another way of showing that if we had more housing, it wouldn't just benefit our families obtaining housing, but it could affect the economics of our society as well.
It makes me think that maybe the question we need to be asking about housing is not so much where, but who is ready to help with that, and where is that at? You know, like, who's out there already? Who wants to have this conversation? Let's go there and have the conversation and build there. Maybe we need to be asking the who and not just looking for where. I'm going to sign off here at 8:45, but it made me think of, I've made a list here of how intersection has connected, but Rich, your example made me think of policy and people, right? So there's that connection as well. I'm looking there at Paul Furukawa and how 2 days after Uvalde happened at the intersection, we began to form a collaborative that we still haven't fully named. We call it Sane Society. We also call it SAN Society. How do we make this society, you know, sacred and holy? But within that kind of violence prevention, preparedness, intervention, the COPS Metro and ICANN have stepped up in terms of gun violence, policies, procedures, and that's at work, and people can connect there. How can we also, though, help families be able to talk with children? How do we prepare ourselves? So I appreciate, Rich, that you brought that up, because it made me think about, oh, and like police reform. So it's, this gathering, you know, is about like direct service, but it's community engagement and activism. And, you know, there's not a magic wand, right? We can't just do one whole swoop and make it all better. I think about the housing strategy, and it is a document that I'm deer in the headlights with. But there are people working at parts of it, right? Parts of it. And that's how change happens. And we all know that. This is the choir. So I'm going to end at 8:47. Rich, thank you for reminding me about the housing survey. One of the things that I am going to be doing, and I've been inviting us all along the way, but we're doing some major cleanup in terms of communications. We need more people at the intersection, more connections that are deeper into other areas of the community that aren't showing up. We need to make those relationships, and how we can all be about that together. So be on the lookout for some communications that you can share with others and move forward. But there's a housing survey currently. There's going to be one coming on domestic violence prevention, congregations and organizations. So that'll be coming. But we're cleaning up the mailing list, trying to get more people into the auto texting system. So let's work together on that and try to get as many people at the intersection getting strong together. So I want to thank you all. And we've got the diehards here on the screen. So thank you, choir. Thank you. And so Bill, send me that link when it's ready and I'll send that out. Communicate, communicate, communicate. Gandhi said you can't be a community without communication. So we got to work on that. So thank you all. Good days, good weekends. I hope